Miami, Florida, May 11, 1981. Bob Marley collapsed on the floor of his home and never got back up. The official story said cancer. But what if it wasn't? What if someone who loved him, someone he trusted completely, had handed him death in a glass of water just days earlier? And what if the reason was so twisted, so dark that even now, decades later, only a handful of people know the truth? This is that story. Bob had been fighting cancer for months. Everyone knew he was dying. The doctors in Miami had tried everything, but the melanoma was spreading. Every treatment failed. Every day, Bob got weaker. On May 9th, around 4 p.m., someone walked into Bob's hotel room. Someone from his inner circle, someone who'd been with him for 15 years, someone he never would have suspected. He was carrying a glass of water. "You look exhausted, Bob. Here, drink this. You need to stay hydrated." Bob looked up from his bed. He was really tired. The treatments that morning had drained him completely. His throat was dry. "Thanks," he said, taking the glass. He didn't notice the slight tremor in the man's hand, didn't catch the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet Bob's, didn't see how quickly he turned to leave after Bob started drinking. Bob drank the entire glass. It tasted like water, normal water, nothing strange about it. "I'll let you rest," the visitor said, already at the door. Bob nodded and set the glass on the nightstand. "Thanks for checking on me." The door clicked shut. In 2 days, Bob would be dead, but why? What could make someone do this to Bob Marley, a man who preached love and unity? What secret was worth killing for? To understand that, we need to go back 3 weeks. April 18, 1981. Kingston, Jamaica. Bob was home between treatments. The cancer wasn't responding to anything the doctors tried, but he wanted to spend time in Jamaica, with his family, with his music. That Saturday afternoon, Bob went to his office at Tough Gong Studios. He needed to check something, some financial documents that had been bothering him. His business manager handled all the money, had been handling it for years. He'd grown up with Bob in Trenchtown, known him since 1966. Bob trusted him completely. But lately something felt off. Bob pulled out the ledgers and started going through them. At first everything looked normal. Then he found it. A second set of books, hidden in the back of a filing cabinet. The numbers didn't match. Large amounts of money were moving through accounts Bob had never seen before. Payments to companies he'd never heard of. Withdrawals that made no sense. Bob spent the entire night going through everything. The more he looked, the worse it got. Someone had been stealing from him. For years. But it was worse than theft. These accounts were being used for something. Something that could destroy everything Bob had built. What exactly? Bob wasn't sure yet. But the pattern was clear enough. Money going in, money going out. Always in cash. Always untraceable. The next morning, Bob made a phone call. "We need to talk. Now. Come to my office." An hour later, his manager walked in. He saw the ledgers spread across Bob's desk and his face went white. "Bob, I can explain. 15 years. Bob said quietly. "I've known you for 15 years. And this is what you do? It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been stealing from me, using my companies for something I don't even want to know about." The manager sat down heavily. For a long moment, he didn't speak. "I got into trouble," he finally said. "Bad trouble, with people you don't say no to. So you used me? I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice." Bob stood up. "I want you out of my business, out of my life. I need time to figure out what I'm going to do about this. If you go to the police, I haven't decided what I'm doing yet, but you're done here, leave." The manager left, but something in his eyes should have warned Bob. Something cold, something desperate. Bob didn't tell anyone what he'd found. Not his wife, not his lawyer, not anyone. He wanted to handle it himself. wanted to figure out the right way to fix this without destroying his reputation in the process. That was his mistake. That night, the manager sat alone in his house. His hands were shaking, his mind was racing. If Bob went to the police, everything would come out. Not just the theft, everything. The people whose money he'd been moving, the deals he'd made, the things he'd done, those people didn't forgive. They didn't forget. They'd kill him slowly and make sure he felt every second of it. But Bob was already dying. The cancer was everywhere. Weeks left, maybe a month or two at most. If Bob died before he could go to the police, the thought made him sick. This was Bob, his friend, his brother. But what choice did he have? He thought about the people he owed, the Colombian cartel connection who'd threatened his family, the Kingston drug runners who knew where his mother lived, the men in suits who'd told him flat out that he belonged to them now. Those men had already made it clear what would happen if Bob talked. It wasn't just him who'd suffer. It was everyone he loved, everyone whose address they knew, everyone whose routine they'd studied. The manager stared at his phone for 10 minutes before making the call. Once he dialed this number, there was no going back. This wasn't something you could undo or take back. He pressed the button. "I need something," he said when the voice answered. "Something that looks natural, for someone who's already sick." The voice on the other end knew exactly what he meant. People in that business always did, no questions asked, just business. "How fast do you need it?" "Fast. Within 2 weeks, it'll cost you." "I don't care what it costs." The deal was made. The substance would arrive in Miami, untraceable, undetectable in someone with advanced cancer. By the time anyone thought to look, it would be too late, and no one would look anyway. The manager spent the next few weeks watching Bob, following his movements, learning his routine in Miami. He needed to know when Bob would be alone, when no one would suspect anything, when the moment was right, and researching, learning everything he could about the substance, how much to use, how to deliver it, what symptoms to expect, what would happen hour by hour in Bob's body. On May 6th, the package arrived at his Miami hotel, a small priority envelope with no return address. Inside, a vial wrapped carefully in bubble wrap, clear liquid, no smell. When he tested a tiny drop on his finger, he couldn't taste anything. He stared at it for hours that night. This tiny vial held death. Bob's death, his friend's death, his brother's death. Could he really do this? Could he really cross this line? His phone rang. Unknown number. When he answered, a voice he recognized spoke. One of the men he owed. One of the men who owned him. "We heard Bob found something. We heard he's thinking about going to the police." The manager's blood ran cold. "How did you—" "We know everything. We always know. And if Bob talks, you talk. And if you talk, your mother dies, your sister dies, everyone you love dies, slowly, painfully. You understand what I'm saying?" "Yes." "So handle it. We don't care how. We don't care when. Just handle it. Soon." The line went dead. The manager sat there, phone in one hand, vial on the table in front of him. His choice had just been taken away. This wasn't about self-preservation anymore. It was about protecting his family from men who'd proven they kept their promises. Bob was dying anyway. The cancer would take him in weeks. What difference did a few weeks make? That's what he told himself. That's what he needed to believe. He called Bob. "I know I messed up. I know you're angry. But can I see you one more time? To say goodbye properly?" Bob hesitated. He was tired of the whole situation, tired of thinking about it. But part of him wanted closure too. "One visit, that's it. Thank you, Bob. Thank you." May 9th arrived. Bob had treatments that morning. He came back to his hotel exhausted and alone. His wife had gone to get food. His children were at a friend's house. The manager prepared the water in his own room. He mixed in the poison carefully, watching the liquid dissolve completely. Invisible. He poured it into a clean glass and stood there holding it, his hand shaking so badly the water rippled. He stood outside Bob's door for 5 minutes before knocking. his hand on the glass, his heart pounding so hard he thought Bob might hear it through the door, his mind screaming at him to stop, to turn around, to find another way. But his mother's face flashed in his mind, his sister's laugh, the voice on the phone promising their deaths in explicit detail. He knocked. Bob opened the door, looking pale and exhausted, but still so alive, still so full of the spirit that made him Bob Marley. "You look exhausted, Bob. Here, drink this. You need to stay hydrated." Bob took the glass, looked at it for a moment, then drank it all down and smiled weakly. "Thanks for checking on me." The manager nodded, unable to speak. His throat was tight. His eyes were burning with tears he couldn't let fall. He wanted to grab the glass from Bob's hand, wanted to tell him not to drink it, wanted to confess everything right then and there. But it was already too late. Bob had finished the water. The poison was in his system now. "I'll let you rest," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. He left quickly. He couldn't stay. Couldn't look at Bob's face anymore. Couldn't bear to see the trust still there in his eyes. Walking down the hotel hallway, he felt tears coming. What had he just done? How had his life become this nightmare? He'd just murdered his best friend, his brother, the man who'd given him everything, but it was done. The poison was in Bob's system now, working through his body, attacking his organs that were already weakened by cancer. In 2 days it would be over, and the manager would have to live with what he'd done for the rest of his life. That night, Bob felt strange, more tired than usual. His stomach hurt, his head pounded, but he'd been feeling bad for months, so he didn't think much of it. Just another bad day in a long series of bad days. He called his wife, told her he loved her, talked to his kids, made plans to come home soon, plans he'd never get to keep. Did some part of him know? Did his body sense what was happening deep inside? He had nightmares that night. In his dreams, he saw faces, people he'd trusted, people he'd loved, and one face kept appearing, the face of his manager, holding something, a glass, a vial, something dark, something deadly. Bob woke up sweating, his heart racing. Something was wrong. He could feel it deep in his bones. Something was very, very wrong. But what? May 10th. Bob felt worse. Much worse. His organs were starting to fail. The poison was doing exactly what it was designed to do, mimicking the final stages of cancer, creating symptoms that looked entirely natural. Everyone assumed it was the cancer progressing rapidly. That's what terminal illness looked like, right? Sudden decline, rapid deterioration. The doctors checked on him and adjusted his medications. They told him to rest. But could they tell the difference between cancer and poison? Would they even think to look? Bob lay in bed, thinking about his life, his music, his children, his legacy. He thought about the songs he'd never write, the grandchildren he'd never meet, the world he was leaving behind. He thought about the financial mess too, about the betrayal, about trust and how it destroys you from the inside. But he never connected it to the water, never suspected that visit the day before had anything to do with how he felt now. May 11th. Bob was fading fast. His family rushed to Miami. They wanted to be with him. Bob told them he wanted to go home, to Jamaica, to die where he belonged. They started making arrangements, but Bob wanted to rest at his Miami house first before the long flight. That afternoon, he was in his Miami residence. His wife was in the kitchen. His children were in other rooms. Bob stood up to walk to the bathroom. He took 3 steps. His legs gave out. He hit the floor hard. He couldn't move, couldn't get up. His wife heard the crash and ran in. She screamed. Bob's eyes were open. He was conscious, but he couldn't speak. His body was shutting down. The poison had done its work. Paramedics came and tried to revive him, but it was too late. Bob Marley died there on the floor of his Miami home. May 11th, 1981, 36 years old. Official cause of death: complications from melanoma cancer, organ failure, standard progression for someone in his condition. No one questioned it. No one looked deeper. Bob had been dying anyway. This was always how it was going to end, right? The manager heard the news in his hotel room. When the call came, he broke down and sobbed for hours. He'd killed his friend, his brother, the man who'd given him everything. And for what? He went to the funeral and played the grieving friend perfectly. He cried real tears. Because despite everything, he had loved Bob. And now that love was twisted with guilt and horror. After the funeral, he went to Bob's office. He found the ledgers, destroyed them, and burned every page. He covered his tracks and made it like the theft had never happened. For 6 months, he thought he'd gotten away with it. Thought Bob's death would be his secret forever. But someone had noticed something. A nurse named Patricia Williams had cared for Bob in his final days. She'd studied toxicology and knew what poisoning looked like. Bob's sudden collapse didn't match natural cancer progression. Too fast, too sudden. The symptoms were wrong. She tried raising concerns, but the doctors dismissed her. He had melanoma, stage 4. This is exactly how these patients go. But Patricia kept asking questions. Who'd visited Bob? What had he consumed? A hotel maid mentioned someone bringing Bob something on May 9th. Patricia tracked down a name. Bob's business manager. 6 months after the funeral, Patricia went to Bob's family with her concerns. At first, they didn't want to believe it. But they remembered things. Overheard conversations. Strange behaviors. They hired private investigators. What those professionals found was shocking. Years of theft, millions moving through shell companies, money laundering operations, connections to drug cartels in Colombia and Kingston. The investigators found coded emails about packages and deliveries, bank transfers, a package delivery to the manager's Miami hotel on May 6th, priority shipping, no return address, phone records showing calls between the manager and known criminals. Threats, demands, promises, the pieces were coming together. But could they prove the poisoning? Bob had been cremated, no body to test, unless someone confessed. 7 months after Bob's death, the family arranged a meeting. They told the manager they needed to discuss Bob's estate. He came unsuspecting. They sat him down in Bob's old office at Tough Gong. Bob's wife, his children, his closest friends, and the investigators. They laid out everything. The financial evidence, the shell companies, the money laundering, the connections to dangerous people. The manager's face went pale. He tried to deny it, but the evidence was overwhelming. Then Patricia spoke up. Bob's symptoms didn't match natural cancer progression. I've studied toxicology. I know what poisoning looks like. The manager's hands started shaking uncontrollably. You visited him on May 9th, Patricia continued. 2 days before he died, the hotel staff saw you. You brought him something. What was it? Just water. He was thirsty. What was in the water? Nothing. It was just water. But his voice was breaking. His eyes were red and filled with tears that had been waiting to fall for 7 months. They showed him the delivery records, the package to his hotel room on May 6th. What was in that package? Silence filled the room like smoke. Heavy. Suffocating. Bob's wife stood up and looked him in the eye. You killed my husband. The manager broke completely. Years of guilt and fear and horror came pouring out like a dam bursting. I didn't have a choice, he sobbed. They would have killed me, killed my family. The people I was dealing with, you don't understand. They don't give you choices. They don't negotiate. So you killed Bob instead? He was already dying. The cancer was going to take him anyway. I just moved it up. Gave him a few less weeks of suffering. That's all. Just a few weeks. You gave him poison. The manager nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. I gave him poison. The confession hung in the air. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of those 4 words crushed everything else. Why? Bob's oldest son asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why would you do this? The manager explained everything through his tears. The debt, the dangerous people, The threats against his family, Bob's discovery of the financial crimes, the ultimatum he'd received, the phone call that sealed Bob's fate. They told me to handle it or they'd kill everyone I loved, my mother, my sister, my nieces, everyone. Bob was dying anyway, I thought. I thought it would be mercy. Spare him the pain. Spare my family. Spare everyone. Mercy? Bob's wife spat the word like poison. You stole his last days, his chance to say goodbye properly, his time with his children, his final songs, his peace. You call that mercy? The manager had no answer. Just tears and guilt and the crushing weight of what he'd done. The weight that would never leave him. The family faced a choice. Go to the police with the confession or handle it privately. They chose privacy. The confession was recorded and every word was documented. Then they gave him an ultimatum. Leave Jamaica, leave the music industry, disappear. If we ever see you again, if you ever try to profit from Bob's name, we'll release everything. The confession, the evidence, all of it. The manager left that day with nothing but the clothes on his back. The family made sure everyone in the music community knew what he'd done. No details, just enough to ensure no one would work with him. He vanished. Some say he went to South America. Others claim he died a few years later from suicide, unable to live with what he'd done. But the deeper questions remained. Questions that haunted Patricia and Bob's family. What if the manager was telling the truth about being threatened? What if there were others involved? What if the people who'd threatened him had actually ordered Bob's death? What if Bob had discovered something bigger than financial fraud? What if his death was part of a larger conspiracy? Patricia documented everything she found and put it all in a sealed envelope. After her death, it would be given to Bob's family to decide what to do with it. Bob Marley died on May 11, 1981, and the world mourned a legend. But a few people know there's more to the story, about the glass of water, the trembling hand, the poison disguised as kindness, and possibly the larger conspiracy that may have wanted Bob silenced. That truth is locked away, waiting. One day, someone will open that envelope and the world might learn what really happened. How the man who sang about love was murdered by someone who claimed to love him. And maybe, just maybe, who else was involved? Were there others? Did the manager act alone? Or was he just the weapon someone else wielded? Maybe some secrets are meant to stay buried forever. Or maybe they're just waiting for the right moment to surface. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. New videos about Bob Marley will be uploaded to the channel soon. Turn on notifications to be the first to know.